Hey now. Man, it's cold. Roads are slick. Welcome to the Sam Dean Podcast, where we talk about life, uncensored. Today on the show, one of my favorite teachers of all time, good friend of mine, Truman Oakley. I'm excited for today's show. It's Friday, y'all. The podcast is sponsored by Alicia Munden and Justin Munden with Dash Health and Wellness. Follow them on Instagram and Facebook. They specialize in weight loss, and they're great coaches. And Alicia does CrossFit, and Justin runs. We're also sponsored by Van Zandt Coffee. Try our new roast from Mexico, Durango. It's good. It's light. Heavy caffeine. I love it. It's our latest roast, Durango. Order it at vanzandtcoffee.com. Thank you guys for listening to the show. We've got almost 3,000 views or listens, and we're going to give Joe Rogan a run for his money. Here's Truman Oakley. Thank you guys. All right. Truman Oakley, welcome, sir.
Thanks. It's glad to be here. Honored that you would ask me, and looking forward to it.
Well, my fondest memory of you, other than when we've become friends later in life, is So Truman Oakley was my, at one point, assistant principal, I think, but mainly a science. I know you from being a science teacher.
Right, in middle school.
And Halloween, you put on a Halloween show.
Yeah, I remember that.
And
Count Ocula.
Count Ocula. And we'd come in there and sit down in the room. It was so cool because the room was dark, and you had some dry ice or something. You had smoke in there. And we'd come in and you would put on a science, kind of a creepy, haunted science show. And it was amazing as a kid, and it was super fun. And I hope you're still kind of doing that. When's the last time you've done that?
Well, probably the last time I actually did that was back in those days at Canton Junior High. I've had some ideas along those lines since then. Of course, I've just been back in the classroom. This is my third year back, and of course, this year, you can't do anything like that this year. Mm-hmm. But I have a lot of ideas for that, and but actually, last time I did that was then.
That was at that time. Was it Mr. Callahan was the principal?
Yes,
Max Callahan, who I'm going to have him on the podcast soon, hopefully.
Yeah, he needs to do this.
You're up there, Mr. Young. Max Callahan, though, also just nice guys. Always had my back. Always very encouraging. Also gave me licks. I think you gave me licks at some point.
I might have.
Do you remember giving me licks or not?
I don't, not off the top of my head, but you forget a lot of that over time.
So when I got to West Point, I was telling somebody, and I was like, yeah, and I had to get licks. And they said, you had to get what? I said, licks. Some paddled my bottom. And they said, you got to be kidding me. You let a grown man hit you with a paddle on the butt. And I was like, yeah, that's what y'all didn't do that? It's like, no, we don't do that. And but I remember, in Canton, you were kind of, and I won't say it's like a sissy or something, if you didn't get your detention burned off by licks, and I don't know, it hurt. It did. It hurt.
Well, and that's one of those things. People just don't understand. They think of it as abuse, mm-hmm. and it has been abused by many people in many circles. And I got to the point in my career where I just didn't do it anymore. Yeah. But honestly, kids that I had to give, especially little kids, when I was an elementary principal, mm-hmm. when you talk to them about what they did, and you let them know this is what's going to happen and why it's going to happen, and when it was over, I mean, they hugged you, they cried on your shoulder. Mm-hmm. People can't imagine how that's a positive experience, but it really was. Yeah. And in my life it was. I got licks at school. I got licks from my dad. I never thought in a million years anybody was mistreating me.
Right.
I always knew I'm getting the consequences for what I did. It's fair. I would always talk to kids about, do you think this is fair? And
Right.
if they didn't, we would talk through it. And kids are missing that. And
Communication.
yeah, it's just that. And some of those relationships I had with kids that I gave more licks to than I can count are some of the best relationships
Right.
I ever had with kids, and people will never understand that mindset, or a lot of people never will.
I got, licks from both my mom and dad. And then, when I give George, when he really messes up, we do it. It's not fun, but it serves a purpose, I think, and it stings, and it physical, a little bit of physical sting to just to, I guess, to help not make that same decision. Or, sorry, my dog Freckles is she's trying to dig at her shadow, so
she's fine.
But anyway, so we don't do that anymore, right? The schools don't.
No, we do.
Yeah.
I'm at Eustis High School now, and Eustis High School still does. I mean, it's always a choice like that to burn off detention. Trey, last year as a senior, he didn't get a lot of detention, but he would get some, and he would much rather go in and get it burned off. Now,
Right.
Trey's a reactive guy, so he would react to those licks, but he would much rather take it and get it over with.
He's a screamer.
Yeah. He would much rather get it over with. I think the anticipation killed him worse than the actual getting the licks, but he would rather do that than sit in detention for 30 minutes.
Larry Dunn.
Oh, yeah.
Mr. Dunn gave some hell of a licks. He gave some pretty good licks. And he'd make you put the hands on the desk. But, he could swing that thing, man. And he's, always had a good tan. Larry Dunn was always tan, very tan individual, well-dressed. But he really knew how to give a lick to somebody. So, I remember those.
Oh, yeah. And the ones I would witness over the years, Max Callahan, Max is one of the most competitive people you'll ever see. But Max is not he's not an imposing physical person. You don't walk. It's not like a big old coach. But, man, I've watched Max give licks to some big old boys. And, their eyes were watering. And he had the technique down,
He had a small paddle. I remember his paddle was
Joe Kari, the old Joe Kari game. They never knew that they made the perfect paddles for school administrators.
Where do you? Yeah, go ahead. Where do you get a lick paddle? Like how do you go into?
A few I made. I had an old Joe Kari game. And it had these laminated, and they were the best paddles ever made. You can still buy them on eBay. That's probably where principals get them these days, But I tried to model mine after those. I made a couple on those patterns, but they would always break. And anyway, but Max had that Joe Kari paddle, and that was the ultimate. Yeah. The company, whoever made those, Atari or whoever, I'm sure that's never what they intended for their paddles to be used for, but they were awesome.
I want to say he had some athletic tape on the handle, and I think he had a string that he put around the wrist just in case it got wild, and he could, a lanyard, if you will.
Yes, it did. They were perfect.
Yeah,
I got plenty with those, and I gave a few of those.
I wish, I had an assistant to look up real quick. Like, what schools are still giving paddle licks with, in today's times?
Most
there can't be a lot.
No, and most rural, at least here in Texas, East Texas schools, I would imagine West Texas too. It's legal in Texas.
Mm-hmm.
You try to cover all your bases, and with younger kids, you make sure. Parents always have the chance to opt out of that and say, no, I never want my child to get licks. But it's still a challenge. The few I've gave in the last several years as an administrator, I always called parents. Mm-hmm. They would always agree that this is what we need to do. But even still, if you paddle a junior high kid, his behind's going to be red. Mm-hmm. It just is. If it's not, it wasn't very effective. And, if they detected any redness or the kid complained that it hurt, well, then they were still mad because
Right.
I'm like, well, what did you expect from this?
Yeah.
It's corporal punishment. It's whether you're running for punishment or it's intended to be physically uncomfortable. So at one point, I just made the decision I won't ever give licks again. Now, I did for my own children.
Right.
I didn't have to very often, but there's still a lot in Texas. Probably not many in cities. Probably not Dallas, Fort Worth, Metroplex. We get too refined for that. So I don't know.
Well, liability wise now, anyway, I get it. All right, where'd you grow up?
I grew up in Canton, Texas. My dad, gosh, I don't know how many generations go back in Van Zandt County. My grandfather, my great-grandfather, my great-great-grandfather, at least on the Oakley side, came to Texas from Georgia, and that would have put it, early 1800s, and always out in that Canton, Martins Mill community, and my parents my dad graduated, I think, in 1961 from Canton, and they moved to Dallas for just a short time. And I was actually born while they were still living in Canton, or while they were still living in Dallas. I was born in Kaufman, a little clinic. They didn't even have a hospital there. And they built the house out there in the Walnut Springs community that I grew up in when I was just a few months old. And so I lived in that house my whole life and grew up there and went to Canton High School and went to Tyler Junior College, went on to A&M, but I grew up right here in Canton, Texas.
So what building did you go to high school in?
I went to it would have been the building that you went to junior high in. It was the, it's gone now, but where the current junior high is, it sat just in front of that. And there was that old metal building, the annex building behind it. Yeah. But I went to high school in that building.
So what year did you graduate?
1983 is when I graduated.
That was the year I was born. Right there. 1983. So what was going on in 1983?
Gosh, in my life, we were, I lived out in the country, and, of course, we had you might talk to a friend. I mean, you hung out with your friends at school, and but after that, you didn't talk to them in the afternoon. You went home, and I went home, and I fished and helped my dad and helped my granddad. They had dairies, and I had my chores I had to do, feeding the cows, and of course I played all the sports, so I'd have football practice. And then
was the Davis Dairy in operation in 1983, or was that before?
It started right about that time, probably. I think those were out there.
There were a lot of dairies.
Yeah,
a lot of them.
And it's sad that my granddad and my dad, they kind of experienced the end of the small dairy operation, and you just don't find those. You see those old barns scattered all over the country now.
Why was that? Why'd they go away?
Well, I think just milk prices. I know when my granddad retired, my granddad had the best luck with financial things, and my dad seemed to have the worst luck. But when the government, there'd get to be an oversupply of milk, and so they would pay dairy farmers to not produce, and you'd put in a bid for how much you would take for your production, and they would only accept a certain amount. Well, my granddad got ready to, if I may be stating it wrong, but the theory's the same. Like when my granddad, he was getting ready to retire and just be done, and the government came out with one of those programs, and at that time milk was going maybe for like $25 for 100 pounds. I might be off on that pounds and numbers, but the theory's the same. And so that was about the going price for milk. And so the government had a program. You put in a bid. What would you take for your production for the next 5 years, I think it was. And so the people that really wanted to get out, they would put in a bid for like $9, $8, so they would be sure they would be under the number. Well, my grandfather thought, well, I'm getting $25 now. I'm going to retire anyway. I'll put in $24.99 and just see what happens. And the cap that year was $25. He was under it by 1 cent, And so for 5 years, 5 more years, he got paid for his entire production with no expense, no feed, no anything. And so ultimately, that's why a lot of those went out of business. The government paid them to go out of business because there was an overproduction of milk. And then bigger dairies came in, and smaller dairies couldn't compete with that, So that's my best recollection. I'm not an expert on it at all, but I know that's why a lot of these small dairies went out,
What kind of farming or ranching operation were you doing as a kid? Was your dad doing that you kind of helped with, big or small, over there in Walnut Springs?
Well, my dad was just a jack of all trades. I mean, he always talked about how he barely graduated from high school, but he could just fix anything. He was just gifted with, I would say, as an educator, I would say it was spatial reasoning, because he could look at a machine and just understand how it works. Definitely, if he took it apart, he knew how it worked and he could fix it. And so he did a lot of everything. He worked for Sears right out of high school, but he learned very quick he didn't want to work for somebody else. So he came back to Canton and he worked for Pargas. They sold propane, and he sold propane, and he bought a little insulation machine and insulated houses. So as a little kid, I helped him do that. I'd climb through attics and itchy fiberglass insulation. Yeah. He would always tell me, I use Ivory soap. Ivory soap will pull out those little fibers stuck in you. I don't know if it really helped, but it made me feel better. But so he did that for a while. A few years, he raised sweet potatoes. When I was pretty sure I was 8 years old, because he had an Alice Chalmers tractor, and it was no power steering or anything. I could drive it. It was the classic. He had to build the wood on the pedals so I could press them. But I could drive the tractor down the row. I wasn't strong enough to turn it, so I would drive it to the end of the row, and then he would get off of the potato setter or digger and come around, turn it out, get it on the next row, and then I would drive it to the end of the row. So we did sweet potatoes. Of course, all that time, my granddad had a dairy there just past the Walnut Springs Church. And so I always had chores on the dairy to feed certain cows. And there were times that my granddad, he hardly ever missed the milkings. He may have missed in 40 years. He may have missed one or two, sick or whatever.
So if you're driving down 2909 and you're going towards Martin's Mill from Canton, you look on the right, and there's Walnut Springs Church. Right to the right of that field, that's where you were driving that tractor. Right in there? Yeah,
right in there. Well, actually, where he raised sweet potatoes was just past, you keep on going down that road. My granddad's dairy would be on the left, and then you turn that road, the Carter Cemetery Road, Thrill Hill Road.
Thrill Hill, yeah. Many times, yeah.
Just to the right of that, on the right side of that road, I believe the Lewis family owns that land now. But that was my family's home place back then.
Okay.
But eventually they lost that land, and my granddad tried hard to buy it back, but he never could. So he bought land just adjacent to it in those Kickapoo Bottoms. But my dad leased some land there, and we cleared out trees, and he made places to farm sweet potatoes back in there.
Wow.
But all that other land, we cut hay off of. So we were, I drove the truck from to haul the hay until I got big enough to haul the hay, and then I was hauling the hay, and so it was always hay hauling, cow tending.
Yeah.
Ultimately, Dad got some dump trucks and a backhoe, and we put in septic tanks and just anything it took to make it.
Yeah. Hustling.
We made it.
What any sports or band or anything?
I did a little of everything. I was in the band. I played football. I loved baseball and basketball. I was, I was one of those kind of farm strong kids, so that worked good for football. And now my sophomore year, actually in 1980, I got to play on the varsity a little bit, and we were good. We were 9-1, and my junior year, we started off great guns, but of course back in those days, that year in 1980. Van had just won the state championship, maybe the year before, maybe 2 years before, right in there. But Van was in our district, and our only loss was to Van. But that was the day where the only people that went to the playoffs were the district champs. And So
how it should be.
We finished. Well, yeah, I still think so. We finished second and 9-1, and we didn't go to the playoffs. And then the next year we just kind of went downhill, and we didn't finish real strong. But I loved playing, and I loved baseball. I just loved to interact. And
is Van still was they were the rival, right?
Yes.
The main rival.
Yeah, they were our Van, Wills Point.
Why is Canton and Van always the big rivalry?
I don't know. That's a good question. We grew up with those guys and at track meets and things, and we always got along. I mean, we didn't fight. We didn't have personal issues, but man, we really wanted to beat them, and they really wanted to beat us. And during my time, they generally beat us way more than we beat them, but we still fought to the last, to the last on that. In fact, the last high school game I played my senior year was against Van, and they whipped us. I believe it was 42-0. But I remember to the very last play, man, I was giving it everything I had, and I'm like, we're not. In fact, we didn't win a single game that year, but I was like, I'm not backing off these guys. We may not. I may not can score a touchdown, but I can get this dude in front of me. So he was going to get all I had, and I've run into a few of those guys over the years, and I was like, well, I thought I was a decent player, but a few were like, man, are you that Oakley guy? Dang, man, you laid me out. You could hit. And, especially as you get older, it's like, hey, I always wondered. I thought I was pretty good at that, but I'm glad you said that.
It was back when you really could lay somebody out, damn near kill them, and everybody clapped for you, and you didn't get in trouble, Yeah.
And then you just helped them up and went on back, and let's do it again.
Everybody was concussed multiple times during the game.
Oh, I remember many times wandering to the wrong huddle and my friends pulling me back because I couldn't see straight, and like, okay, here we go. Let's line up and do it again.
How good of a memory I would have from childhood if I never played football. If I could remember way more, or I have a normal memory. But every play was just a huge collision.
It was.
Why Texas A&M?
Well, at the time, I was young for my class. My birthday's August 30th, and so I was young. I was 17. No one in my family had ever gone off to college, and I initially thought, as a kid, I'm like, college, that's going to take forever. So I thought, I'm going to go to trade school or something. And so I signed up and went through everything, and I went to a little trade school in Dallas. And just the first week up there, I realized this is not for me. And that's a great path for many people, but it wasn't right for me. So I moved back home, and I worked with my dad the rest of that fall. And then in the spring, I enrolled at TJC. And always knew I wanted to work with kids. We talked about Max Callahan. Max is just always a hero and a role model for me. And
was he a teacher of yours?
He was. My relationship with Max actually started when I was 6. I played on his T-ball baseball team. I was one of the Falcons, the Super Falcons, and we just built that relationship. And as I got to be a teenager, he asked me to help with the Falcons, and I helped him coach. And I love working with those little guys. That was one of my first realizations of how other people are watching me in life, because there are these little guys. They're grown men now, Trey Lively and Cody. I'm blank. Cody Clark. Burke Lewis.
Yeah.
Rest his soul.
He's a good guy.
But guys like that were all in the Falcons. But I coached those little guys, and they were fun. But then, I was in high school, and so I'd be at a football game or something, and those little guys come, hey, Truman. They were pulling on my – and I was like, whoa, these little guys see me everywhere I go. And it was really profound to me, because it was like, I tried to do the right things, but that hit me hard, because I'm like, man, if I'm out doing the wrong things, if I'm drinking, if I'm not talking the way I should be talking, these little guys see that, and they're going to think it's cool whether I'm doing the right thing or the wrong thing. And it was a very profound moment in my life when I was like 15, 16. And anyway, but in that same time, Max was my teacher in junior high, and then I helped him, and that's where I knew I wanted to teach, or I wanted to work with kids. Now, I knew teachers didn't make a whole lot of money, and I was always very interested in medical things and science, and thought hard about medical school, optometry, things like that, and ultimately I stuck with education, and I certainly don't regret that. I'm still very interested in medical things, and my daughter's kind of following that path. You know, she's in pharmacy school now, and it's kind of fun to get to see that path through her, you know. So it's kind of neat how life brings those things around.
The thought of being a role model, whenever you actually were one, was motivation for you to get in the teaching field. But take me back to TJC. You went to TJC.
Yeah. I was at TJC for 3 semesters, and had some of the best teachers I ever had, especially in college, but some ever were at TJC. And I lived at home and drove to TJC, and I had a few of my high school friends that went to A&M, and you know, I'd always liked A&M, but I kind of had a thing for Baylor for a long time. I don't know why. I just like those colors. Mike Singletary and those guys. I looked up to those.
He went to Baylor? Singletary?
Yeah, Mike Singletary was. Yeah, he went to Baylor.
Ashley Dean went to Baylor.
Hey, yeah, I know. It's great. Got some great kids that have gone to Baylor over these years. But some of my friends went to A&M, and I ended up at a Aggie football game at Texas Stadium. They played SMU, and that Aggie band came out, and all the Aggie tradition, seeing all that, I'm like, holy cow, I want to be a part of this. And so put in my transfer request, and I transferred to A&M in the fall of 85. I went to TJC for 3 semesters, and then I transferred to A&M and ended up graduating from A&M. You could still get a degree in education then. They've changed all that up now, but
where did you live down there when you were at A&M?
A bunch of us Canton guys lived together.
Who were they?
James Eblin, Nathan Nix, some guys a little younger than us, Reagan Sumner, Kirk Pierce, Todd Bartlett, a bunch of those. We lived in the same complex, and we just kind of flipped around whoever needed a roommate this semester. To James Eblin and I we stayed together through all of that. Rata Knopp he stayed with us some.
Is that Mr. Knopp's?
Yes.
And Mrs. Knopp's son?
Uh-huh.
Okay.
Rata was he graduated in my class and went on to got a job as an engineer, worked in the space program, was affiliated with NASA for a long time. I've lost touch with Rata. I don't know where he is right now, but I'd love to reconnect with him and see what he's doing. He's probably designing things for he may be in with Elon Musk or something.
SpaceX,
you know?
Probably.
But ended up at A&M.
Rata, if you're listening, get in touch with Truman.
Yeah, there you go. I'd love to hear from him. Rata was always fun because he was a little bitty guy, and he was always, Truman, I like hanging around with you because you're big. I feel very safe when I'm with you. Of course, Rata, I was a pretty laid back guy. Yeah. I would have certainly protected Rata, but I wasn't gonna fight unless I had to. But just I was big, so it made him feel safe. So.
Where was Becky Oakley in all this?
Wow, well, Becky Oakley is quite a bit younger than me. I'm 8 years older than her. November 15th, 73. It's her birthday. We didn't meet until 94, late 93 is when we met. I had my first job was at Martin's Mill. I taught science for a year there, and then Max called me because I wanted to work for Max, but he just didn't have a job that first year. And then I taught at Kenton Junior High for 2 years. And I've always been I take my faith very seriously and was always involved in ministry of some kind. And I just really felt called to be involved in ministry full time. And I took a call to to be the youth minister at First Baptist Church in Post, Texas, out near Lubbock, and spent 2.5 years out there, and that was wonderful just to get a dose of West Texas, and that was really my first time away from Canton on my own. When I was in college, I came home a lot. I was really never that disconnected from Canton, and so that was a really good time for me. And through a minister there, Terry Don Thomason, he moved to MacArthur Boulevard Baptist Church in Irving, and I loved baseball, and we were always talking about baseball. And when he got there, he kept telling me, "Man, Truman, there's this girl that works for our church, and she just loves baseball. You need to meet her just because y'all love baseball, and y'all both love Jesus, you know."
Yeah.
And he ultimately introduced us, and that was Becky. And he introduced us, and we met. Actually, the first day we met was on my birthday. Terry Don and I were going to Six Flags together, and we just met, and she was a very pretty girl. I was like, "Hey, is that the girl you're talking about? I'm kind of might want to learn more about that." And he set up a date for us to go out with him and his wife in October, I think, and we started dating, and it was one of those things I knew pretty quick. This is what I don't need to let go of this, you know. And we got engaged the next February on Valentine's weekend, and we got married July of that next year, in July of '94, July 16th. And so but Becky actually, she was born in Boston. Technically she was born in Brookline. She's a twin, and she was actually born at home and then taken to the hospital. Her twin story is pretty good because she was born at home, and then her sister Debbie was born in the elevator at the hospital. So they're twins, but Becky was actually delivered in Brookline, and Debbie was delivered in Boston. So they're twins that were actually born in two different towns, about 20 minutes apart. But anyway,
cook a little longer in the oven, sister.
But that's been neat because it just, that connection to a different culture, and because the Northeast. And
do y'all ever go up there, or have y'all been up there?
We have. Yeah. We've been to Boston a few times. Becky has her grandmother. They lived in Maine. Her mother's from Maine, and we've been there a few times. Her father's from Beloit, Wisconsin, just north of Chicago, and so a lot of connections to Chicago and the Cubs. Morris he's a huge Cubs fan. Becky's a huge Cubs fan. So,
what do you and Becky like to do? Just for instance, Ashley and I just got into watching Wheel of Fortune. So it's a stiff competition. Whenever we can watch. Now with Hulu, we can kind of record it and watch it whenever. But Wheel of Fortune gets pretty heated over here. Is there anything? What do you guys like to do or watch? Is it baseball or is it?
We really love sports. She really loves sports, so we love to watch sports. We love to travel. And
is it the Rangers?
Yeah. Usually, I mean, we're big. I was a big Rangers fan. She introduced me to the Cubs. Her allegiance is. I mean, she's a diehard Cubs fan, but she's a diehard Rangers fan too. If the Rangers and the Cubs ever ended up in the World Series, that'd be tough on her. But of course, the Cubs won the World Series just a couple of years ago, and that was one of the highlights of her life. Though it was one of the most stressful times of her life too, because I watched her go through the Steve Bartman days and all that. But we love sports, and our kids, Trey and Samantha, just things that revolve around them, growing up with all the things they did and being involved in their activities. And just as they continue, of course, Samantha just got married, but, just enjoying our kids. And we love to travel. Our travel has usually revolved around baseball. We've been to 23, 24 Major League ballparks. We want to make them all eventually. So we usually have a baseball trip planned this summer. COVID killed that last year and this year. We're probably going to do National Park this year, but we love movies and just hanging out, good places to eat, and just talking. Becky's she's just such a steady person, just so even. She's just perfect for me. How
do you adjust? Trey just graduated from high school and went to Where's he at, Stephen?
East Texas Baptist.
ETBU in Marshall. Samantha just got married. She's been at A&M. How do you adjust when your kids leave the nest, man? I know it's hard.
Yeah, it is, but what's made it good is when you see your kids happy and thriving. And Samantha, I mean, she thrived from the beginning at A&M, but she went through some, ups and downs, finding the right mix with roommates and changing majors, just dialing into exactly what you want. And when those days were a little uncertain for her, that was hard because it's like we want her to find her niche, and she was close to it. I mean, both of our children, we've been so blessed because they're both amazing kids, amazing young people now. They're not kids anymore. But when she found her people and when she found her niche, and then ultimately when she met Ross, and we knew pretty quick he was going to be the guy, and we love him. But when you see them so happy and so in their zone, it's been truly, I think, the greatest feeling in the world, just knowing your kids are thriving. And it's been the same thing with Trey. I mean, Trey meets people, and he's the life of the party kind of guy. But he has his moments too where he's insecure, but he's found just a wonderful group of friends, and that are just the right friends. They have fun, but they support each other in their faith and in their walk with the Lord. And
when one of your kids comes to you and they don't know what to do, like if they can't decide on what's the best way, and I know you're not perfect, you may not know, but what do you do? Like when Samantha couldn't figure out a major or was unsure of or roommates or whatever, like how do you help them? Because you want to just make the decision for them always, right?
Exactly. And especially as men, we're fixers. But I mean, I've always really tried as a person with kids in school, with anybody, to not make decisions for them, to help them talk through it. For one, I would never let them give up on something too soon. There were a lot of times through maybe a sport they were in or something, and maybe they wanted to quit or they wanted to do this, or maybe they were in a class that they were struggling in. And I won't be too specific in some of those. Yeah. I could give some specific examples, but it might embarrass one or the other. But I remember one particular time with one of our children, who will remain unnamed, Trey. But but he was just in a class that wasn't going. It was a dual credit class, and it was a new experience for him, and it wasn't going well, and he wanted to get out of it, and I just wouldn't let him, and he wasn't happy about that. But I think it's very important to let our kids struggle. It's hard, but I just see it so much with kids these days. They don't know how to deal with adversity. That may be the single biggest weakness I see in kids and ultimately in parents, is kids don't know how to deal with adversity because we bail them out all the time. Mm-hmm. And so I would make them, I wouldn't make decisions for them. I would make them have to, and Becky feels totally the same way. You're going to have to go through a struggle and figure it out, Now, we would support them all the way. We would listen. We'd give advice. But we let them know, ultimately, you're going to have to decide and make a decision. And sometimes we knew the decision they made that they were going to struggle. But in it, there was a degree of blessing in it because you knew they were going to be better because of the struggle. Mm-hmm. And I just think that's so important. One of the biggest things, and I don't get the opportunity to tell people that very often. As a principal, I did, but, when you assign consequences to somebody and parents just instantly want to get them out of the consequence, I try to let them know, look, it's ISS. It's not jail. Yeah. It doesn't go on their permanent record. Everybody thinks there's this permanent record out there that's following them everywhere. Like, let them experience some adversity, even if it's not their fault. let them go through it.
Yeah.
It's okay. You're going to deal with things in life that are unfair. And I've always tried to do those same things with our kids. Like, they would come to us about things that, well, it's just not fair. Like, well, life's not fair.
Life's not fair.
You have to learn how to deal with it and not lose your mind. But again, that's a long answer to that. But
it's good.
But just trying to not bail them out, steer them, but again, let them struggle. And
so if your kid gets in trouble at school, it's important to let them, not try to get them out, try to bail them out. Respect the teacher in front of the child too. I mean,
exactly. Even if you disagree, even if the teacher's wrong or the principal's wrong. I was a principal for 19 years. I was wrong plenty of times. But you know, nothing. Whether it's we talked about corporal punishment earlier. Even if you have to take your licks and it turns out you really weren't guilty, you know.
Yeah.
You learn from those kind of things. But
the punishment is also a lesson.
Yes.
In a way, like dealing with that.
You know, it is, and it prepares us for so many things. But most of the time, you know, the punishment is fair, and most of the time it's lighter than it should be, honestly, with many things. But you know, parents do, and I completely understand. We don't want our kids to hurt and be uncomfortable, but they need to be uncomfortable. They need to struggle. You know, it's that, and I'm a science guy. I always hear this illustration, and I use it a lot, and I think it's accurate. I wouldn't swear it's accurate. It may just be a story, but like a butterfly, when it's coming out of that cocoon, you know, if you slice that cocoon open and help it just pop out, it's got little tiny wings.
It's gonna hit the ground.
And it's just gonna hit the ground. Part of that struggle of pushing out of the cocoon, it pushes the fluids from its body into its wings, and it makes its wings do what they're supposed to do. If you bail it out, its wings never develop. And that's such a perfect metaphor for our kids. When they go through those struggles, it's what makes their wings. It's what allows them to succeed. And so that just, you know, just don't bail your kids out of trouble. You know, go to that principal or that teacher, have a conference with them, and let them know why you disagree. But don't tell your kid. You know, just hang in there. Don't get on Facebook and badmouth everything, even if they were wrong. You know.
Yeah.
Just because we're going to go through things like that.
And the teacher, I'll say this, like coaches and teachers, it's a hard job. And they're doing the best they can do, you know, 9 times out of 10. They want the kids to succeed, of course. And they're not doing it for their own satisfaction. You know, it's a tough deal being a teacher. And they need the support of the parents.
They do. And, you know, I love teaching science. And, I loved working with kids in general. But I love it when those teachable moments come up, when that kid comes to me about advice about how to get along with another teacher or how to do this or how to do that. And, you know, and I'll let them know. But you've got to adjust, you know. Mm-hmm. So many kids they think every teacher should adjust to them. And like, that's not the way life works. Right. Your boss isn't always going to adjust to you. You've got to adjust.
Miss Nixon, Jimmy Nixon, tough teacher, English teacher. Everybody hated Miss Nixon, this and that. But when I got to West Point, when I first semester at West Point, I was plebe year. It was tough for me. I was failing everything besides English. Because, like, I had my ducks in a row. Because she made me get my ducks in a row.
Uh-huh.
And I knew how to write papers. Because I was so scared of her. You know, and I just wanted, and it was tough. And then, you know, most of the kids are going to they're going to cheat off other kids. You know, like, you're going to copy people's homework. until a teacher steps in and says, or parent, like, hey, the 0 is what you need, and that's what you're going to get, because that's not your work. And that was, at West Point, everybody adjusted to that, the honor code. You couldn't, you if you did cheat off somebody, you had to document, you had to write exactly, and the punishment for that is getting kicked out automatically.
Yeah.
For being a character issue, which is so important. But it's where you're in school because you're learning. You're a student. You're learning how to live, learning lifelong things, learning that cheating is not acceptable, that, if you do screw up, you're going to get punished for it. It's huge.
Well, and kids, I teach biology. Right now we're studying DNA and RNA replication. Of course, that has some pretty pertinent things to life right now, but a lot of kids, it's very tedious and it's very boring and it's not their thing. And you can see they're like, wow, on earth am I having to learn about all this? And I try to let them know, unless you go on to something in the medical field or something, you probably never take another biology class. But you're going to constantly have to learn subjects that you really don't want to learn. Specifications for something in your job, and working hard, even when it's something you don't like, builds that discipline. It builds that character. It builds those good habits. So put yourself into it. It's easy to work hard when you love it. Mm-hmm. It's hard to put forth that 100% effort when you don't like it. And, very few of us have gone through life without being in a job or a situation that we didn't like, but we had to endure for a while, maybe even years. And, just trying to teach kids those life lessons it's just a huge opportunity. And that I was the same way with Miss Nixon, now I had an advantage with Miss Nixon, because Kevin Nixon was on the Falcons, back to those Falcons stories. And the very first day of her class, I'll never forget, Miss Nixon would always give you her spiel. Most of you I don't like, I'm not going to like, but in my class, but I like Mr. Oakley because he coaches my little baby in baseball. Well, that made me feel good about her class, but you can imagine all the heck I caught from my classmates. But I didn't really care because I thought, okay. But she still pushed me. I mean, now I can talk in front of crowds. I like that. I probably talk too much. It's like, it's time to shut up. But in high school, I did not like to get up in front of people. And we had a poem we had to learn. And I learned it. I knew it. I knew it backwards and forward. But when I stood up to say it in her class, I just froze. I even teared up because I was so nervous and I couldn't say it. And she gave me a pretty hard time. Just, Truman, if you don't know it, just sit down, And I'm like, no, I know it. Just give me a second, And
wasn't that the worst? Doing those poems?
And I finally, and I never could get it.
Yeah.
And she was pretty hard on me, and I was finally just fine, just forget it. And I'm a senior in high school, and I sat at my desk, and I was bawling pretty good because I was embarrassed, and she saw that, and she came. A lot of people think she's tough and never had any compassion, but after class she came. Because I was gathering up my stuff. I wanted my friends to get on out of there, but she came over. She's, now, Truman, do you really know that poem? I said, yes, ma'am, I really know it. Well, take a deep breath and see if you can say it to me. Yeah. And I stood up, and it came to me just right, and I said it perfect. And she was just, thank you. And of course, I was still mad.
Yeah.
So I just took off. But that's huge, too, that she saw that and came back. And there was a lot of that little part of her that
she cares.
She really did.
I loved her to death.
Yes,
absolutely. What public speaking? People say people fear public speaking more than like sharks or
yes, more than death usually.
More than death. I remember Miss Barry, our drama teacher. We had to get up and do a bunch of that. I don't remember in Miss Nixon. Probably did it in Miss Nixon's class too. But I used to be the same way, man. My armpits would sweat and they still do. But when I get up in front of class, I mean, my entire shirt would be wet from anxiety. And I do it every day with CrossFit. I get up and speak in front of 10 people or whatever, and I don't think twice about it. It's reps.
Yes.
It's repetitions of getting in front of people, and you get better over time. I mean, simple as that.
And I think a lot of it, and I love this in teaching, is I love it when I mess up, when I misspeak or I say something wrong and a kid calls you out on it. And I love the chance to just be real in front of kids and say, oh, you're right, I was wrong, because that's another thing in life. There's not enough of that in life these days of people saying, I was wrong about that. Of our, how many times in the big Facebook battles and things do we see somebody, I'm sorry, I shouldn't have written that about you. We don't see those things. But so I love those opportunities to tell kids I was wrong, because we need to hear so much more of that in life.
Whenever I have a leader or a friend or somebody that says, guys, I made a mistake, I messed up here, this is what I did, to me, that I give instant credibility to that person, because I feel like that person's honest and transparent. Trust. Nobody's perfect. Everyone makes mistakes. Exactly. I make 100 a day before lunch, and it's to come be forthright in that and taking stuff back. But I understand. And as far as social media goes, there's never a winner on an argument in social media. Even if you think you won, you've really lost, because everybody sees how dumb you are with the argument. And that's really morphed into a sad, crazy thing that has a grip on most people, myself included. I wish I wasn't so tied to it, but it's very much a part of our world now. And
there's so many positives to it. I enjoy it. I enjoy keeping up with people. I enjoy reading when people are just real and honest about things. I love to see that. I hate that people. I wish we could eliminate the share buttons, and that we're not just sharing memes, that you have to put original content out there.
Yeah, I agree.
And where I hear your thoughts, because that's what I want to, and it could be a force for so much good in our country, to really be able to hear what's on people's minds. And when I write something, I try to be that way. Now I'm always going to put pictures of my cows, or if
I like to keep those coming. I like those.
If as an old man, I got a PR, I'm going to put that out there,
Yeah.
Like I thought a few years ago, I thought those days were past, but so I'm going to brag on those things.
See, and I fall into this trap every once in a while, but people are just, we want to find something to complain about. We want to be negative about something, and it's like in the 90s or before social media, most people didn't know what was going on in politics. Nope. Unless you watch 60 Minutes, like, you really had no idea. And now you have all this information at your fingertips, and people share it. Your cousin shares it and you read it. But also, like, there's a 90% chance that that's not even true.
Exactly.
So in order now these days to have something that's actually true, you need to research it. You need to research the conservative news outlet version of it, and then also the left-leaning news outlet version of it, and then make a decision for yourself that's probably in between those two things before you need to comment on it or not, because you might be getting the wrong information. And these people know, and that are making this, they say, well, we're in this business to make money, and they'll tell you, like, yeah, no, this is liberal, this is conservative. So it's scary. And I have conversations with people. People come and say, well, they're gonna, next thing they'll be swabbing us anally for the coronavirus, or something crazy.
Yes.
That or there's Chinese troops going to be in Canton, Texas, locking us down, or there's going to be, when the election happens, they're going to come put chains on us, take our guns, and there's a lot of people that thought that was real and terrified.
Mm-hmm.
And it's because somebody was kind of careless on social media and shared something and was like, look at this, what they're trying to do. But there's people out there that believe it at face value, and it's scary.
Well, and there's just such a lack of common sense these days. The thing I love about my heritage from my grandfather and both my grandfathers, all of my predecessors, my dad especially, they were just people of good common sense. My granddad, I think he went to school through the 4th grade. He dropped out. He told me stories about he just couldn't read. And now these days, I would have no doubt he would have been dyslexic, but he just didn't know. But math, he could do so much math in his head, and he was a very successful farmer and just worker and managed his money. And my dad, just practical. But they just had common sense and wisdom, not knowledge. Big difference between wisdom and knowledge. And that's the thing on social media. People see something that fits their agenda, and they don't apply any common sense to it, and just think, yeah, there's something wrong with that, And that's another thing I try to do with kids is when they throw something out there, we try to examine it and talk about it. And I like to throw some of those weird conspiracies out there. We'll talk flat Earth stuff in school, and I'm like, guys, there are people that really believe this. Well, let's look at them and see why they believe it. I'm not trying to get you to believe it, but really try to put yourself in another person's shoes. Empathy. People don't understand empathy anymore. They think it's sympathy, and it's not sympathy. It's truly being able to put yourself in somebody else's shoes and feel what they feel. And
what's a smart person? What's your definition of somebody that's intelligent?
Oh, wow, that's a good question. I mean, true intelligence, and I separate those as intelligent and wisdom, because there are, and a classic example, we're studying, if people have done biology very much, they know Watson and Crick, James Watson and Francis Crick. They discovered the DNA molecule. I mean, those guys were intelligent. And James Watson is still alive. I believe he's still in his 90s. But James Watson has said some extremely harsh things in life about race and women and not very wise things. So there's a man that is a genetic pioneer, won the Nobel Prize, a very intelligent man, but has some very questionable ideas on things, So, there are the intelligent people in this world that, they think on a level that I can't even comprehend. The Elon Musks of this world, the geniuses of this world that come up with these ideas. Now, some are just risk takers, but, intelligence straight up is, I think it's a gift. And man, I'm really drifting back here, but one thing I've had to do during the pandemic is not watch the news all the time, because it's not just been the pandemic. We've had all the racial tension and politics, and I can't take too much of that. So one thing I've done is, I've always loved history, but I've just invested a lot more in history, reading more history, biographies especially, and something that has struck me in all of this was I've read and reread and listened and re-listening to Washington by Ron Chernow, the biography of George Washington, and what's the name of his main servant that always stuck with him? Lee was his last name. Ron. I'm blank on his first name right now, but you could tell he was an intelligent man. He wasn't an educated man, but just from things you hear in his story. But and I see someone like that. So it's not necessarily, I don't equate education with intelligence. Some people just have a gift of being able to understand certain things. But definitely intelligence is a great trait for anybody to have, but without wisdom, I prize people that are wise far more than people that are intelligent.
What about self-awareness, though? I think somebody that's self-aware, that knows how they come off to other people, or in your case, empathetic, you can put yourself in other people's shoes. It has a lot to do. Has a lot to do with, I think, intelligence.
No doubt.
Not just, you got book smarts, you got, that guy's smart as hell, he's a dumbass, like.
Yes. There's a lot of that. And I think that is the difference. It's that self-awareness, self-actualization, in psychological, cognitive development terms. You'll hear that term, self-actualization. And how many people never reach that level of cognitive development. They reach concrete, and it's almost, it's not quite equivalent to abstract thinking, but it's the same way. A lot of people just never, their mind just never develops to the point where they can truly be an abstract thinker, and just like some people never develop that point of self-actualization. They're not self-aware, and there's all kinds of studies and psychology behind it, and I mean, you can spot that. Now I think you can still, if you just slow down and take a look at yourself and think, just being a thinker,
Does it start with reading comprehension at a young age, maybe? People that, you have to read. I guess you could watch something, but you have to read and learn, and then, think, because, most things that are written are opinion pieces. And like in Afghanistan, for instance, people couldn't read, mostly illiterate. So they got the news from their relatives or from either a radio broadcast or something that their relatives or their friends told them or their boss told them. And it's easy to take advantage of people when they can't think for themselves. And you can tell them a certain way and say, hey, well, these, the Nazis burning books or whatever, let's get rid of this. This is the way, these are all lies. But, if you're educated, I guess, if you know how to read and comprehend, and you can get multiple sources and then form your own thought, I think that's
I think you're exactly right. Just reading on your own, but not just reading things that fit your narrative. Read other things. Read perspectives on things. That I've been reading a lot. I mean, I think I've always been a decent student of history, but right now there's so much racial tension in our country, and so much of that comes through. I've read it started kind of what got me going on was the musical Hamilton, which is so amazing. But I'm like,
incredible.
How did they make this out of a book? So I read the book, and it's by Chernow. And what else did this guy write? So I read Washington, and he wrote a book about Grant. And when you read those stories, those biographies of presidents, they walk you through. I mean, racism just flows through that, and it just. I mean, I've always understood. Had a good grasp on how poorly we've treated African Americans in this country from the beginning, and but some people still don't see that. But the more I've read, the more it makes me want to read more. And right now, I've barely started, but I'm reading a biography of Frederick Douglass because I just want more perspective on those issues where I can maybe be a voice in my own circle to help people kind of understand. We just don't. So many people, because I'm the bad guy in this country. I'm the middle-aged 55-year-old white man from the South. I'm the prototypical.
Doesn't get any worse than that.
And but I want people to be able to hear from me and see from me that I don't think that way. These people we're brothers, we're equals. And back to Washington's, Washington was such an interesting guy because he was really tortured over. I mean, he had slaves all of his life, but you could tell he knew it wasn't right, and he could only come to free his slaves in his will, but just when you watch that, so I think about earlier, I said I don't know my exact genealogy, but I know my people came from England, mm-hmm. Great Britain, in probably the late 1700s, and but I try to think back. Okay, what about my relatives then at their age versus a black man at the same age, same experience, and when we think
doesn't compare at all.
When we think, because there are those say that I haven't had an advantage over anybody else in my life. I've had a huge advantage.
Yeah.
My relatives could buy land. They could, and as you read those biographies about people that fought in the Revolution and how much land they got, and ultimately the power they had over their own lives because they had land. But slaves couldn't have land, and even, I mean, we're still fighting that battle now. I mean, we barely had the vote. I mean, I was born in 1965. We've been fighting this battle for, over 400 years. And, but again, it gets back to the issue of reading those things enlightens me and changes me, and it lets me be empathetic. Mm-hmm. And if you never do that, well, you're just a victim of your own, the rhetoric you hear around you, and the things you see, and nothing will ever change your thoughts. And reading can do that. I mean, you're not going to travel the world in your lifetime. Most people aren't, but man, in a book you can.
In a book you can.
And you can. I've read a lot of World War II history, D-Day, and mm-hmm. the battle in Europe, and being able to walk through the lives, Stephen Ambrose stuff, mm-hmm. Band of Brothers, and then Citizen Soldier, and I'm reading D-Day now. But, they let you walk through the lives of those guys that were 17, 18 years old, and, and you understand why people call that the greatest generation. And anyway, but yes, reading is a huge thing. If we'd quit reading so much, maybe on social media we need to start posting classical literature. And you've got to, before you can go to bashing your neighbor, you've got to read these things, and
you have to understand him first. Like a Sun Tzu type Art of War, like understand your enemy, aka your Facebook argument guy.
Because it is. We just don't. I mean, we read things and we listen to things that fit our own narrative, and go out there and, if I want to understand more about, I mean, there's so much tension in our culture mm-hmm. over Islam, and if I want to understand that better, I don't need to read what Southern Baptists are saying about Islam. Right. I need to read about Muhammad, and mm-hmm. and not to say I'm looking to or choose that lifestyle, but it'll help me understand that lifestyle. Right. Every person that practices a faith is not bad,
Right.
Many people give them a bad name, but of course you've operated in that world, and
you really have a mutual respect for another soldier fighting across from you. Yeah, and I think a lot of that, like soldiers struggle sometimes, in battle, you're killing each other. But a lot of the guys that shot at us, unfortunately, you're not going to end war until you end world hunger, like poverty, because the Taliban or Al-Qaeda sub-commanders, they'd pay people to shoot at us.
Yeah.
And people had no choice. I mean, $5, $10. The going rate went up to $10 in the Korengal Valley at one time to shoot at Americans. Well, that's a lot of money for them. The more money than they could make in 4 years, probably. So their family's starving. We've invaded the Taliban's out. They used to grow opium, maybe, or they They sold trees to Pakistan, but now they're getting extorted. They don't have that job anymore. Oh, a lot of wars, organized crime. So like these wise guys would come in, aka foreign fighters, and bring money and pay them. And if they said no, they'd probably kill them anyway. So they're just taken advantage of and extorted. And 9 times out of 10, those are the guys we were fighting. And it's tragic. And I think a lot of soldiers, if you have to kill some of those people, you think about that guy, and you think about he's a Muslim, and he grew up here, his family's here. We're 5,000 miles away, come over here, and they think we're Russians because they don't know any better. They can't read. They just knew the Russians were here last, and I remember showing a video of 9/11 to some of the Afghan guys that were fighting with me. They didn't even know about it.
Wow.
And this is why we're here.
Mm-hmm.
And the Taliban let these guys train. And they didn't hand them over to us, and that's why we fought against the Taliban. And one of my interpreters, the Taliban, they caught him with they banned music and art, and they didn't let women go to school. They're super conservative Pashtun, or super conservative Muslims. And he got beat to death because he came across the border from Pakistan. He had a show tunes, like a Bollywood tape in his car with music on it. Would be like equivalent to Hamilton.
Yeah.
And they found it, and they almost beat him to death.
Wow.
So it scares me sometimes when I'm a conservative Christian, but I'm not super ultra conservative where I'm going to beat somebody for having a rap album, because I love rap music.
Yeah, sure.
I love rock and roll and rap music. This and I like a beer from time to time, more than one. But sometimes we get so one way that, like, it's not good to go so far one way. It's not good to go so far to the left. It's not good to go so far to the right, in my opinion. And that's the extremes whenever you start doing stuff like that. And we have to bring people back in for the sake of our country, I believe.
Exactly. And as a Christian, where should our focus be? Our focus should be on Jesus. When you look at what Jesus did Jesus, did he judge? And they brought a woman caught in prostitution to him and said the law of Moses said she should be stoned. Coach Newby, one of those, another Canton legend.
I got to get him on the podcast.
Yes, oh my, that'd be great. But we had back to those football days. I knew the story before, but he pounded it home. We'd had a game with Grand Saline, and my junior year, and we should have won the game, but we got to infighting and pointing fingers, and we fell apart, and we got beat, and we got back in the locker room, and Coach Newby pretty much told that story. He said, there was a man, and they brought this woman, and they said the law of Moses said stone her, and of course, we know the story of Jesus. He just kept fiddling with his finger in the sand, and it went on and on and on, and finally they pressed him to say something, and all Jesus said was, whoever among you is without sin, throw the first stone, and then the lady was, what do I do? And he said, go and sin no more. And who did Jesus hang out with? He didn't hang out with the Pharisees, the elite, the judgmental people. He hung out with the sinners. The apostles. Paul was killing Christians. Peter was. They were fishermen. They were crusty old dudes. Matthew was a tax collector, and those were basically extortionists back in those days. I love the story of Matthew because when they called Matthew, he was sitting at his own table, and they say most tax collectors didn't sit at their own table. They hired people to do that, and they paid them a little money. They say if he was audacious enough to sit at his own table, that just meant he wanted all the money. And so the implication is Matthew was a pretty rough dude himself, But those are the people Jesus called. I think if Jesus came today, and just hung out among us, I think a lot of the church would be surprised at who he hung out with. I don't think he would be hanging out with all the church people. He's going to be hanging out with sinners, and but yeah, and it's back to that same thing, back to empathy. Can we're not dealing with the specks in our own eyes. We're trying to get the specks out of other people's eyes, and we don't turn it towards ourselves.
Who was your favorite teacher that you had?
Oh goodness, that's of course I loved Max. I had Max Callahan for 6th grade social studies then, and to this day I know more about the Egyptians and the wars, the Peloponnesian Wars, and from 6th grade science or 6th grade social studies than I learned in college world history. I loved Max. Of course, I love biology, and I had Mike Jordan in high school biology, and that just turned on a passion for science with me. I wasn't crazy about English, but I did like Miss Nixon. That's all, we always say that the same way. I appreciated what Miss Nixon did for me, because the same way college English, that was a breeze. Yeah. Because I was ready for that. I had a teacher at.
It's like high school teachers and below. They really care about you because they see you at Brookshire's. Yes. They run into you at Pizza Hut or whatever, and they know your parents. When you get to college, the teachers really don't care. They don't care if you show up to class or not.
Yes.
So, that is another growth stage. Anyway, I don't know how I got onto that. But
and as a principal all those years, the best thing, just relationships with kids, but I got to see so many good teachers, and, I couldn't, I'd leave people out if I rattle off, but I got to see the Elaine Wallings and Evelyn Addises of this world teach. Miss Addis, yeah. And Beverly Allen in Canton. We were contemporary. We taught together, but watching her as a science teacher made me a better science teacher,
Yeah. She made me watch those sex movies in junior high.
But it's, of course,
which needed to be saw. I needed to see that because I had what I thought was going on was not necessarily what was actually going on. So thank you, Miss Allen.
But you mentioned Lewis. You mentioned Mr. Young earlier.
Yeah.
Oh my, Mr. Young he's an all-time treasure. Loved his class and just the things he gave you that passion for reading and looking it up yourself, see, can you find that in the dictionary?
Don't you know that he experienced racism?
Oh my, I can't even imagine. I would love to have that conversation with him, and he would have it. It's just should sit down and have it. Anyway, but he's just an amazing role model. But so many good people. Those are some of my favorites.
One of my favorite teachers in college was Steve and Ruth from Tech. There's actually a picture of him at Man's Ain't Coffee Roastery, in BDUs. But he was a major and short black guy. He was the first whoever the first captain is at Texas A&M, the leading cadet. We call it the first captain at West Point, but he was the guy in charge whenever he was a cadet at A&M. He went to A&M. So he was one of my leadership instructors at West Point, and he's really motivated. He was just ripped, and he was loud, and he'd jump, flat-footed, just jump on top of the desk. And, he really made you motivated to learn and stuff like that. And I actually got to serve with him. He was in the same brigade that I went to Afghanistan with, and he's still in. The other day he sent me a video. He was deadlifting something. He's a full bird colonel now. He was deadlifting, and he sent it to me and commented because he was impressed that one time I ran a marathon just to get a free weekend away from West Point. And that started my whole running career. Yeah. I never ran anything that I didn't have to until I was so miserable my freshman year. They were like, who wants to go to Washington, D.C. and run the Marine Corps Marathon? And you get a free weekend away. I was like, I'll do it. And I did it. But I told him, he's like, no training? Really? No training? I was like, yeah, no training. Just did it. Well, you can't do it, And, but, thank thankful for him and people like you. Another memory of you, the Great Rock Shootout at the we were in the they had some temporary buildings outside, and that's where your classroom was. It was kind of new stuff, so it was nice. Had a bigger desk, but we had the Great Rock Shootout, and it was geology. I don't sure what class it was.
It was earth science.
Earth science, and we had. Sometimes I'll throw out obsidian. It's limestone, sandstone, obsidian. Yeah, it's a black, shiny rock that. Anyway, that was my go-to. But I remember, and this is just one thing. Emily Stafford, a friend of mine, sitting across. I buy hay from her granddad, who just recently passed away. But Eric, her brother, I buy hay from him currently, and I think he said obsidian, and I reached out and grabbed it, pulled it back in, and I think that was all I needed to beat her. And I celebrated, and then she just took her hand and slapped me across the face, and I fell on the ground. And I've never been slapped that hard, and I remember that. Never forget it. And I guess it's kind of like licks in school, like you mess up. It was rude as hell what I did, and I paid for it with pain. And in school, licks, man, they work.
Oh, and if you get kids, and not all kids are competitive. Some kids will just let the other person win. But when you can turn something in school into a competition, and you get competitive kids, man, they'll go after it. To get a ring pop or anything. Just to win. Yeah. But and you remember those things. And it's true in our lives. Anytime there's something associated with an emotion. You're going to remember it, and if it's an emotion of winning or it's funny or and of course hurtful things, we remember those forever, unfortunately. But that's it's a great teaching tool because we get into it and we remember that stuff, and it's fun too, and because I doubt if identifying rocks has played a major role in your life. But the experience does of learning about it.
And it has helped me perhaps on a Wheel of Fortune or something. And I think at one time I saw an arrowhead somewhere that was made from obsidian, and I knew I was like, "That's an obsidian." Yes, it's obsidian. And so, if I was in oil and gas, it probably would have helped me. But anyway, I really enjoyed it. What's the? It's a hard time right now with the coronavirus, and schools a lot of kids are homesick. A lot of kids are, went through the whole at-home learning thing. What advice do you have for parents with children in school to navigate all this?
Just patience. I think people, even schools and nationwide, I think everybody's panicking, thinking our kids are getting so far behind. They're missing out on so many things. And there's no doubt they're not learning every piece of textbook material that maybe they learn. But I just don't see that as a big issue. Now, certain skills, math skills, kids in high school that need to, they want to go on into engineering, their algebra skills need to be solid, their geometry going on into calculus, those things have to build. But I think just everybody relax and realize we're all going through the same thing. Yes, we may be going a little slower, but everybody's going slower. It's going to be okay, and it's going to pass. I think so many people are fighting so hard to, how can we catch up? How can we make up for this? Everybody will catch up. I've having the privilege to work with kids of all ages. I mean, I was an elementary principal, pre-K to second grade. I've worked with junior high. I've worked with high school. And, a lot of times we get so concerned about that second grader that he's just not learning as fast as we need to. Maybe he needs to repeat the grade. But you watch those kids over time, when you end up seeing them in junior high and high school, they all find their level. Now sometimes, and we definitely need interventions in education, but kids will be okay. They will find their water finds its level, so to speak. And I think our kids, they need support and encouragement right now more than they need anything. Kids this year, and I have freshmen and sophomores, and I have a few seniors, but I've never seen kids so vulnerable and open. But in one way, that's a positive thing, because we can talk about a lot of issues honestly that previous years there was too much pride and bravado to ever get to those sensitive things. But I'll weekly I'll have kids just hanging their head, and I'm patting them on the shoulder and saying, "Hey, what's the matter? Just Mr. Oakley, all this stuff, the masks, and it's always going to be this way, isn't it? This is the way things are always going to be from now on." I'm like, no, they're not going to be this way. This is a moment in time, and you're going to learn from having to go through it, and it's no fun, but it is going to pass. That's probably the line I've said more than anything this year is, this will pass. It will be okay. But kids are, they're down, they're hurting, they're worried, and I kind of see. Earlier we talked about what was going on in 1983, and that's tensions were high with the Soviet Union when I was in high school. I remember the movie. I think it was The Day After. It was a TV movie about nuclear weapons, and we thought. I remember being scared as a kid, thinking there will be a nuclear war before I'm 30 years old. It may be the end of things, but it may change life. But I remember true fear of the future because of all that. Well, it changed. We got through it. We don't deal with that anymore. I see those same kind of things in kids now. They're worried. They're scared. They're afraid this is our future from now on, of things like this. And, I tell them it's not. We will get through this. And so I think kids need support and encouragement. And again, if you want to make sure your kid is good academically, it's back to what we talked about. Have them read. Get a book. I don't care if it's a little kid's book, if it's a funny book, if it's a comic book, if it's a history book, if it's Moby Dick, if it's a classic. Challenge yourself and read something. If it's Harry Potter, read something. Let it take your mind some other place. Create something. Learn something. We were talking before we started. I've had to do a lot of things for my own mental stability. I can't watch the news. I can watch the weather, and I like to get highlights of what's going on with the news, but I don't want an overdose of that. But I'm fairly musical. I'm not a great musician in anything, but I can play the piano a little bit. I've always wanted to play the guitar, and Trey has a guitar at home, and I from a kid at school that plays the guitar, Ryan Powers. I'll shout out to Ryan here. Ryan's a great player. Dirty Bynum, their band. Go follow them on Spotify if you're listening to this.
Apple Music, I think.
But
I've heard it.
But Ryan gave me just a few little tips from some YouTube videos, and it's been about a month, and I've been learning to play the guitar, and I can play 8 chords, and I can transition a few of them, and
that's all you need.
I'm like, I could just about play a song. But I'm 55 years old, but learning something new, it just enriches you, and and so anything like that, it doesn't have to be English, and go out and build something. My daughter Samantha and I are wired so much alike, and she's in pharmacy school, and she's just gotten married, and of course she married such a great guy, and they're getting their life started, but it's scary at those times, but she finds creative outlets for things. She's handy. She got a lot of her granddad, and she's been refinishing furniture and buying it. But just finding something creative to do is a big deal. Write a song, write a poem, build something, plant something. Those things are so enriching to us.
Start a podcast,
Exactly. And, it's always dangerous when I spend time with you because I see things you're doing and I'm like, man, I ought to do, because not the exact same thing, but it's like, I ought to do that in my field, in my areas, because I like it. And of course, we've reconnected here in life through CrossFit and fitness. But fitness has done the same thing. It's not just working out, but it's learning more about my fitness and what I can do. And
your body, how your body works.
And like right now, I mean, I went through, a stretch, I think it was October of 2017 when I called you, and I was in such bad physical condition. I mean, I felt bad. I had no energy, and I got to doing CrossFit, and man, did so much for my self-esteem. And now COVID has, about a year ago, I was probably in the best shape I've ever been in my life. And COVID has just killed that. And I say COVID, I could have done a lot about that, but it's been hard.
Yeah. Did you get COVID?
No, I have not had it.
Not that you've known, right? You don't know if you've had it or not, or do you know that you've not had it?
Well, I mean, we've both, Becky and I both, had a couple of spells with some respiratory stuff that could have been COVID. It was very mild if it was COVID. I definitely didn't get a major case. I mean, I know I've been exposed many times because even my family, now Trey has had it, my mother's had it, my sister, but.
Well, yeah, and I hope you've already had it and got through it or whatever, but the work that you did up until could have saved you. You're definitely in a better position to weather a sickness.
Exactly. Well, and like I said, that year ago, I was in the best shape I've probably ever been in, my weight, everything. But in here, a year later, and I haven't, it's not like I haven't worked out and I haven't tried to work on my diet, but because of what I've learned about my body, I've gained some weight and I'd like to lose it, but I feel so much better than I did before I started. I'm stronger. I can go out and I could go out and slug through running a few miles. They would be really slow.
But you can do it.
My strength hasn't changed a lot. I can move weight. I can squat. My mobility is so much different. But anyway, it's back to that. I really didn't mean to turn it to fitness, but it's about learning all those things about my body and understanding it. Just learning new things just enriches us. So during this COVID time, yes, try to keep up with those studies and do your biology homework and do your math homework, but learn something else, and some social media stuff's fine. Some kids are amazingly creative on TikTok and some things like that, but don't get obsessed with that either. Go out and get your hands dirty and raise an animal and, just experience life, walk around in nature, plant something. That you learn more from those kinds of things than they enrich you, or get a job, learn how to get along with people. But just there's so much learning beyond school,
Okay, we're at that time now. 10 questions. You ready?
Sure.
What is your favorite song?
Oh my, there's so many.
Give me one of them. One of the top ones.
The first one that popped in my head, just because I like it the way it sounds. I'm about lyrics and message, and I'm trying to think of that real meaningful song to me. But the first song that popped in my head was Desperado. Yeah. Just because
the Eagles.
I love the Eagles, and I just love the way it sounds, and so that's my first answer.
Clint Black's version was pretty good.
Yeah.
But
it's not the same.
It's not as good.
It's not Don Henley. He just Texas boy. He's
remember Miss Severe, Joyce Severe?
Yeah.
She went to high school with Don.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh, that's cool.
Linden, Texas. Her and my mom are like best friends. So.
That's cool.
If your final meal, you're on death row, and then you get one meal before you go to the electric chair. What are you asking for?
A big, old, thick, greasy cheeseburger. I love a cheeseburger. I like all kinds of food, but my favorite food is just a good I've gotten to where lately, I mean, I like them thin and I like them thick, but I like a good little bit red, well, pretty red and juicy in the middle.
So you order a medium hamburger, is that right?
Yeah, or medium rare.
Medium
even.
rare.
Yeah. Or of course, I usually cook them, but yeah, a good old greasy cheeseburger.
Right. Where do you get? I mean, if you're cooking hamburgers tonight, where are you going to get all this stuff at? I mean, where do you get your meat, and do you just get it at Berkshire's?
Yeah, I usually do. With my cows and stuff, I'd like to get set up, and of course now we've got so many people around raising their own. I'd like to get those connections and buy some of those, but I just get it at the grocery store.
Do you get the patties already made into patties?
Sometimes I do, just because it's easier when you're putting it together in the evening.
Do you ever combine them?
Yeah, always.
Always? So like 2 of those.
Yeah, 2 of those. Because now my wife she doesn't like it that thick.
What kind of seasoning do you put on there before you?
Right now, I'm in a Earl Campbell's seasoning mode. That Earl makes some little powder combination of stuff. I don't know what all Earl puts in there, but it's just Earl Campbell's. I put that. It's like that Frank's hot sauce. I don't use that word that those people use about they put that stuff on everything.
Yeah.
But with Earl Campbell's lately, I pretty much put that on everything. When I'm cooking up my meal prep, when getting my protein for the week and grilling up chicken breasts or chicken thighs, or I put that Earl Campbell's on everything. And from all I can tell, it's I've tried to make it clean. It's just spices and stuff.
Yeah.
There's no sugar. There's no other stuff in there.
Yeah, if it's just salt and different type of peppers and spices, it's good.
Yeah, and I like it.
So is that mustard on there too?
No, mayo and pickles.
Mayo and pickles.
I'm a mayo and pickles guy.
Mm-hmm.
I used to eat lettuce, but getting old, I've learned nothing's slowing me down strength wise. I've got all kinds of goals of things I still want to accomplish, but my insides keep changing, and lettuce just disagrees with me.
Really?
And I just can't hardly eat lettuce anymore. At least iceberg lettuce. No, some of the others I can eat that, but just pickles and mayo. Now I like a barbecue burger and chili and all the most unhealthy, gross things we can imagine. But
I love jalapenos, and man, they do not agree with me though. The next day I pay for it. All right, let's move on. Well, before we move on, what's the favorite restaurant locally that you like the hamburger? Where's the best hamburger locally?
They're not just one. It's a chain, but I always like Chili's hamburgers. I like a good Dairy Palace hamburger. I like an Easley's hamburger.
What's your favorite thing to order at the Dairy Palace? If you go into Dairy Palace right now.
Probably catfish. I haven't had it in forever. I may not have had it since I started CrossFit even, but I just because it's just
they got a good catfish.
It is. It's good. It's always.
There's nothing bad on the menu at Dairy Palace.
But I'll get lots of. I'll get a hamburger and their sodas are great. And, I try not to.
Yeah, we'll edit that out.
Yeah, we can't. But. If I want a treat, I don't drink many sodas at all anymore. But if I just want a treat, a Dairy Queen Coke, a Dairy Palace Coke,
tastes different.
Their mix is just a little bit different. But I hadn't had one in forever. I shouldn't have talked about it. Now I want one.
Favorite movie?
Oh gosh, so many hard questions.
This is a Sam Dean podcast.
This
is not
you,
easy.
These
man.
are the tough questions. For years, my go-to was always Raiders of the Lost Ark. I love Indiana Jones.
It's a safe answer there.
But I really like Return of the King. I like all the Lord of the Rings trilogy, but I really like the last one, The Return of the King. That's an awesome movie. Now I love all the Avenger movies, and
Return of the King.
Yeah, but that's probably my.
What about TV shows?
Oh, if I didn't say this, my family would curse me. But The Big Bang Theory, far and away. I watch it every night. And I watch the same episode. It's like watching MASH back in the day. I've watched MASH episodes I don't know how many times, but I love The Big Bang Theory. And I like it because
you were probably one of the first people to tell me about Big Bang Theory, but the theory. But
well, and the thing I like about the show is I don't care how many times I watch it, it will make me belly laugh.
Yeah.
2 or 3 times, and that's why I watch it, because I need things that just make me belly laugh at least a few times a day. Because if we can't laugh every day, we're doing something wrong.
What's your favorite car or truck that you've ever had?
Honestly, it's probably my old white 2002 Chevy farm truck that I drive right now. It still looks all right, but the fact that it's to me right now, it's cool because it's a farm truck, and that's just where I am in life. And I like that I got a messy, junky farm truck, but it's tight. It's the old, they call it cat eye because it's got those cat eye. But I love that truck. And I would say it's probably my favorite truck that I've ever had right now. And I had a really slick 1977 short wheelbase red Krager Mags truck when I was in high school. And but my old Chevy right now is my favorite one.
I got to drive it, the Chevy. I backed it when you had the trailer on when one of the cows got out.
Yeah.
We it's a good story. It was Pat Hooper, me and you.
Dan was out here.
Dan came out there. A couple of my hunters that were supposed to be hunting helped me. But one of our cows got out, and we actually trapped him in an abandoned house across the street. And I pulled Truman's cattle trailer to the front door, and him and Pat somehow got the cow in the house and then scared it through the door into the trailer.
Yes, that was
awesome. Was besides the recent thing that I did with George Berg, that was my biggest cowboy experience, where I felt like I was legit. We trapped him in the house and got him in a trailer, out of broad air,
Yes, that was
Everybody thought it wasn't going to happen, and it happened.
We made it happen. That's right.
The other day, George Berg, who's a mentor of mine, he's a CrossFitter in Canton, but he sold me most of my registered Angus. His wife, he was over here messing with me, and his wife called and said, "We have a cow down. Come quick." And one of his Angus was on the ground, legs and arms fully extended, hollering and banging its head on the ground, and it had filled up with air. It was triple the size normal.
Yeah.
It was a pregnant cow too, but apparently she had gotten down, couldn't get up, and her organs were, compressed, and she was filling up with air. And she was about to die. It was bad. And his wife, Lenora, is a PA, and I wish I had a video of this, but he had a strap, and he had his tractor. He was trying to roll her over and, trying to get her up, and couldn't, and she had kicked him, and he was been on the ground, and George is in his 70s, and he's been on the podcast, but I was like, we got to stick this cow and get this air out of this cow. And Lenore's like, where do we I was like, Lenore, where do we do it? She's like, yeah, right here. I don't know. So I had my pocket knife, and George is like, no, I'll do it. And he goes, I'm going to get a scalpel. And he goes to the house and can't find one, comes back, just pulls out his buck knife, and he goes, I'll do it with this one. So I get that strap, and I put it around the back legs and tighten it down, and I'm going to hold the legs just to give George maybe a second to get away once he gets close to it. So he runs up and just stabs the cow, and and the knife goes boing and bounces right back. And I was like, well, it's not a good angle. We're going to have to get in there a little deeper, because the hide was tough. But then he just says one more time and goes, and it was like a balloon. It was, hot air balloon, just air coming out. And, of course, it was some nasty stuff coming out, too, but mainly air. And he sat on the cow and got a little more out and got a little more out. But the cow was, you can just tell, instant relief. And, I'm sure that was on its lungs, too. It was a lot of pressure. And in the Army, we have a needle decompression. If you get, a sucking chest wound, that's a whole thing. But I was like, well, we can get the strap around the bottom legs. And was like, let's just run like hell, and I'm gonna give it everything. George, pull as hard as you can. We did it the first time, didn't work. We did it the second time, and we rolled the cow from the right side over to the left side, and she stood up immediately.
Yeah.
So now I'm feeling like a veterinarian, and like Doc McStuffins or something, And then the cow had a stab wound, obviously, but then started eating. Of course, she was completely worn out, and I was able. George got the vet out there, Amanda Davis.
Yeah.
I'm not sure. I can't remember her new name, Amanda Davis, her married name, but got the cow over there, and she checked him out, and apparently she's eating now and gonna make it.
Yeah, it's amazing.
And anyway, that was another experience that was crazy, because I've only been ranching about a year now, and it's been an adventure for sure.
Yeah, the cows they'll teach you. It's like that same thing. You learn something.
Yeah.
Just they cause problems. You got to solve it. It's good for you. Just new things.
Well, I really appreciate you being on. Thank you. This is not the last time you're going to be back.
Hey, we've always got plenty to talk about.
Got plenty to talk about. I enjoy spending time with you. Appreciate it. Truman Oakley. Want to thank our sponsors, Alicia Munden and Justin Munden with Dash Health and Wellness. Find them on social media. They specialize in weight loss and weight loss coaching. And, of course, Van Zant Coffee. If you don't know, we got a new roast out called Durango. It's from Mexico. First time we've ever had a bean from Mexico. And it's damn good. It's one of our lightest roasts we've ever had, too. So it's loaded with caffeine. Try it. Buy it on vanzantcoffee.com. Thank you, guys. Good night.